Welcome to Engage Your Tribe, a podcast about the art and science of audience engagement. I'm Jeremy Shere, and my guest is Kevin Leahy, VP of Marketing at Gravyty. And that's Gravyty spelled Gravyty. Just wanted to make sure everyone got that. So Kevin, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you today, and I appreciate the extra explanation of Gravyty. We just had to be a little bit different.
Of course.
We spell it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I like that spelling. It's very creative. So it's great to have you. Tell us about yourself, about your background in marketing and about Gravyty.
Sure. So I feel like, like a lot of marketers, I kind of got my start in a ancillary field. I started in journalism, and then I eventually switched over to start working with some high growth companies, and specifically in tech. A lot of them were venture backed, most of them were. And I was doing that from the agency side. So then about 3.5 years ago, I had the opportunity to come over to Gravyty when we were just starting to build out the executive team. And we had a couple of things going for us. We really knew at that point what our use case was to customers. And we were ready to start growing the company to kind of bring our tools to the world, not just the niche that we had to start with. So, one of the big reasons that I joined is that we had what we felt and what ended up being a market defining solution. We were the very first AI company created solely to work for social good organizations. And so I know not everybody's familiar with social good, but essentially for us, what it means is we work with the nonprofit organizations, colleges, universities, independent schools, healthcare organizations, any organization that needs to fundraise and use philanthropy to generate revenue.
Okay, very cool. I come from a journalism background too, so I totally get it. And unfortunately, a lot of journalists have had to look for other careers, right? It's just an industry that's kind of imploded in on itself.
Right. I feel lucky to have been around a bunch of talented folks who made it and who did wonderful. And, I think for myself, it was a place where I had a lot of fun. I learned a ton of skills. We're podcasting today. At some point, if I wanted to put my attention to it, I could scratch together, not what you have, but I could scratch something together. And I think, just having that as a base is great because you can always create content. You can always dive into a subject area, figure out what's going on, and bring it back to an audience in a relevant way. And I think that's kind of what marketing is all about. Yeah,
totally. I think journalism is actually a great training for being a really good marketer, especially in our age of content marketing, right? Because you understand how to talk to other people and like source them to create content. So you're not just always talking about yourself or your company, or you're drawing from your own internal people. You can reach out and then build content by talking to other people, right? And that's what journalists do.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're nothing without a source.
Yeah. Right. And storytelling, all that stuff. So, okay. So now, especially since COVID hit the world, a lot of fundraising, like everything else, kind of slowed down. And when we chatted a few weeks back, you were telling me about how, especially since then, you guys have really leaned more heavily into content marketing to create community around what you guys do, but around, in the fundraising world, to help people learn about how to continue to fundraise and keep that going during the pandemic, right?
Sure.
And I know that's not all you talk about, but that is sort of an important catalyst. So, and I was struck by that phrase, building community. That I think that gets talked about a lot for good reason. So let's just start right there. What does that mean to you, using content to build community?
Sure. So, from a basic standpoint, where kind of we were coming from, in social good, we don't have sales departments. When you're selling to a for-profit company, everybody to some extent understands sales. So organizations, use philanthropy to generate the revenue that they need to. And to do that, they have to inspire donors. Fundraisers don't always like being compared to sales. In fact, most of them hate it, and that's fine. But what we do is we take a page out of that sales enablement playbook and do what we just call it fundraiser enablement. And so what our product does is it prompts fundraisers to reach out to the right donor at the right time. It actually has a patented piece of it that writes the first message for that person to edit and send along however they might, if that's a phone call, if it's an email, whatever it might be. And so, it's pretty new. It's pretty different. And it takes a lot of education as to why you might need a tool like this, why you might need to think about things a little bit differently in general. And so we were kind of coming from a base of education to begin with. But then when COVID hit, I think back to like that very first day. We probably all have one day where we were in the office or we were somewhere and we said, okay, things are real right now, or things are changing right now. I don't feel comfortable being in the office right now. We did a stress test the week before and we got our employees ready for it. We all tried working from home to see if the company failed, our day from home and all that. But so we made our team feel comfortable. And then what we heard from our customers was, they still weren't comfortable. Our executive team is made up of fundraisers. So we do a really good job to understand customer feelings and where things are headed. And what we heard was that our users didn't even know if they should be contacting donors right now. That's their entire job.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what was appropriate and what they should be doing. And I bet a lot of sales teams went through this as well. But when you're working in philanthropy, you actually have an advantage here because, you're supposed to build a relationship with a donor over many years. And you get to know them not quite like a customer, but there's a little bit more of a personal relationship there. And so just reaching out to even check on somebody's health and things like that are actually kind of natural things that fundraisers can and should be doing. So a lot of folks had questions about like what they might do there. And we pulled together a webinar. It was pretty hasty. I think we pulled it together in 3 days. 2 of those days were over the weekend. We got a few partners together. We just called it Fundraising During a Crisis, and we put it out. Typically, we were getting like on a good day, 80 folks into a webinar when we were doing really good. So we pushed this one out, and we got 1,500 people to sign up right away.
Wow!
By the time we went live, we had 3,000 people on the webinar. So we knew, we had tapped into something, and we just gave our guests, the panel that we made, kind of an open stage to offer their advice. And the question that we kind of asked everybody is, should fundraisers be reaching out right now? And the overwhelming answer was yes. Yes, they should. And it was just like we had kind of done this on the marketing side where we said, well, we can pull together a webinar and see what happens. We reached out and people responded to us. We were kind of offering our own advice to people at that point. But we also saw it from just the product usage. People were not reaching out to their donors. So we gave them that forum. If I look back on it, we probably didn't answer a lot of questions, but we gave people a forum to, have conversations, to understand that others were in the same situation, and kind of let them know that we'd be working on this problem with them. And from that, essentially, it became a matter of, well, how can we educate them more? And, what should they be saying? We recommend that they reach out. What should they be saying? And how should they be reaching out? Should they just be giving updates on what their organization is up to, or should they be going as far as telling folks about their changing needs? We had a lot of universities, for example, that suddenly had to use emergency funds to get students home, send them across the country, and make sure that they got home because it wasn't safe to have them in the dorms anymore and things like that. So there was a lot to say, and it was kind of like we were able to help folks have the confidence in saying it to their donors. And so that spurred in so many different ways for us. We had additional webinars. We wrote lots of guides, lots of how-tos. We have a weekly fundraising academy at this point. We did a masterclass. There were just so many different types of content that we could develop from it. And really, it's been about keeping that educational tone with our audience and treating our audience like a community as well.
Wow, that's a great story. I mean, it speaks right to the heart, I think, of how content marketing can work, when it's done with the right intention, the right planning. And it all starts with you listen to your customers, right? It's like, it's right. Kind of as simple as that. They were telling you, how do we do this thing? And you're like, well, actually, we have some thoughts on that. Let's put together a webinar. It doesn't have to be super fancy, right? Like, doesn't need to plan it for like 8 months. Throw it together and boom. Like, if you can align your content with the needs of your audience, it can just blow up. And you, before you know it, you have this content train just running, and it's giving you all sorts of value, giving your audience all sorts of value.
Right. It's there's that idea of giving value all the time, but also just like, if you take down the walls of the presentation, can you still deliver value to them, or are you delivering perceived value? And because of the way the company was built, where we came from this industry and all that, we were able to really deliver on that. And it's something I'm proud of, and I'm proud that leadership understood where we were unique and was willing to put the time into that.
Absolutely. I mean, I can imagine if you're a marketer, what could be more satisfying than being able to respond to your audience's needs, and then doing it and then getting massive feedback like, yes, thank you. This was exactly what we wanted. Like, that's what you live for as a marketer, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The feedback is, I guess coming from journalism, there's a part of me at the core that says feedback is gonna be bad.
Right.
Feedback's where the real, it's a different level of value. And it's so important, because even if you were wrong, but you're willing to have that conversation about understanding where you were wrong, or understanding somebody else's perspective, it just spurs, and it just, it's the snowball effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's interesting. Like we were saying before about journalism and marketing, and like there's, it can be good training, but they're very different in practice in some ways fundamentally, right? Like, as a journalist, unless you're an opinion journalist, I guess, like, you're just following the facts, and your job is, based on everything we know and the people we've talked to, here's the truth of what happened, right? As far, as best we can tell in the most balanced way. Marketing is, you're trying to get at truths, but it's more, I think, like what you said, like an ongoing conversation with your audience about the things that they care most about. And really the audience is your guide for where you go, what you talk about, how you talk about it. And if you're really good at it, like you guys are, you're not just telling them what they want to hear, but you're telling them things they don't already know, and maybe even challenging some commonly held assumptions, stuff like that.
That's such a great point, because there's such a tendency to just talk about what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And that's not it at all. I mean, I guess I have this whole tangent about SEO strategy
Mm-hmm.
and kind of, SEO can be the beginning of producing great content. But to some extent, what all you're doing is you're saying, well, what questions is my audience asking, or what topics are they willing to latch onto? And it's a great idea that's where you can kind of meet them and where the conversation starts. But, and I've learned this from trying and failing, but, if you don't show them that you actually get it and that you can build from that, then you lose a lot of value, and it takes time to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm not an SEO expert or anything, but from what I understand, it's like it's changed a lot, right? It used to be you could kind of game it more easily and keyword stuffing and all that stuff, and now Google is like, no. You actually have to have some substance in what you're saying. It can't just be garbage, right? And if you really want to rank highly, and yeah, I think you're totally right. It's the questions people asking. Your initial response is just the start of what ideally will be an ongoing conversation, where you're not just providing the first easiest answer that everyone's providing. You're providing your unique perspective on that question, and maybe even challenging what they might have assumed or something like that.
Exactly. And if you can't make that transition, that's really the mechanism for me. What I'm judged on from an ROI standpoint is, at the end of the day, if I don't produce sales demos, then I have a very tough time at my job.
Yeah, right.
And so, if what we kind of organize Gravyty around is making sure that we have intelligent people who are ready to take that, maybe it's an inbound request, or maybe it's, we see the activity on the website, but to take those indicators and then pull together an intelligent conversation to push back at somebody, or, to take that an outbound channel and develop that into something that generates a demo. That's where we've seen success. And that's how we kind of convert content creation into real value for the company.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which is, after all, ultimately a big part of why you're doing this. I mean, it has to generate value at the end of the day, to a certain extent, right? And actual revenue value, right?
Absolutely.
You're not a nonprofit. You help nonprofits, but you yourself are not a nonprofit. Like, you are in this to, grow and generate revenue and all that, right? So that's the other side of it.
Right. And, early on in my career, I would say that was a scary thing, having that responsibility. But the more I've grown, the more I've leaned into it. It's everything. Personally, it makes me more valuable. But if you just look at it from what you're doing every day standpoint, you're finding ways to win in ways that are undeniable. And I think that's something that, it's powerful as a person to take on. It's powerful when you show your employees how to do that, and they start to get the program. It's addicting almost. I don't know if addicting is has the right connotation to it, but it's something that I love doing, and it has a building effect.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's very goal oriented, right? It's like, Absolutely. And especially if you do come from something like journalism, or which is, no one gets into journalism to get rich, especially not anymore. But even, most journalists, I mean, there are some journalists obviously who become rich and famous, but for the most part, not. And there's even a little bit of a disdain for, profit or going after, growing and all that stuff. And the same in academics, And I mean, I definitely had this coming out of that background, but if you're going to be in business, you better get your head around, like, well, at the end of the day, it is about making money.
Mm-hmm.
And everything kind of has to be oriented around that. But that, and one thing I had to learn, which took a while, and I'm still learning it, is just like, that doesn't invalidate everything else, or it doesn't, like, it still means having to connect with other people in a very human and real way. It still means being creative, and it definitely means telling the truth and helping people. And if you do all that in the right way, then it will help you grow. Mm-hmm. There's nothing nefarious about it.
As long as you're bringing value to the world, right? Value to your customers, value to your audience, then I don't see a problem. And as long as you're, like you said, being truthful, bringing value, then there should be some expectation that there's an exchange at some point.
There's always some kind of exchange, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, whatever you're doing, it's right. And exactly, value. It all comes down to value, which takes us back to what we were talking about before, the building community around content. I mean, it's all about you're offering value without asking upfront for anything in return.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of counterintuitively, unless you've been doing this for a while, you do get the return. It just might, in a slightly more roundabout or, less linear way, but you definitely get return, and even maximize your return if you're willing to stick with that.
Right. I think what it comes down to is that when you're delivering value and you're able to do it almost effortlessly. I think I still got it wrong. But as long as you're delivering value, I think what folks want to do is they want to work with other people who deliver value to them.
Yeah.
And they will find reasons to be around you, or to use your product, or to find intersections where the two of you can live.
Right, because they get a lot out of it. In one way or the other, they get a lot. They get a lot of, and everyone gets a lot out of it. It's not a zero-sum game then, right?
Exactly.
It's everybody wins. We're supporting each other, growing together, and yeah, absolutely. Well, wow. Well, there's so much more we could talk about, but I need to let you go. You got other things to do. You gotta help other companies.
This has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks so much for coming on.